Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. This video is all about some of the favorite fantasy novels that I read in 2021. Doesn't mean they came out in 2021, it's just that I read them for the first time this year. Interestingly, a lot of the fantasy that I read this year, and many of my favorites, are not traditional types of fantasy. It's not necessarily what I would have expected, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Let's start with the first novel on the list, which is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I'm putting this on my fantasy list, even though more accurately it could be called speculative fiction, because there are some sci-fi elements that become introduced throughout the trilogy. But when you are starting with the fifth season, which is the first book of the Broken Earth trilogy, it feels pretty solidly fantasy at that point. I'm cheating a little bit. I would actually put all three novels on this list. I binge read them within 1 month. Technically, I listened to the audiobooks for them. And then was kicking myself, wondering what took me so long to pick these books up. There's a reason that each novel in the trilogy won an award. In this world, society has come to expect nearly apocalyptic, society-ending natural disasters. They call them seasons. Society has been built up in order to survive these seasons. Townships are very important. Everyone has their caste or their role, and they do drills so that when a season comes, hopefully their small town or city can survive the resulting fallout. At the opening of this novel, a horrible earthquake has occurred. People know that a season has started, and they're starting to hunker down. So it feels a little bit post-apocalyptic in that sense, but it's more like the apocalypse hasn't happened yet. We're not in the full aftermath. It's still unraveling. In this world building also are hints of the civilizations that came before that didn't necessarily survive the seasons, which is a nice little bit of flavor within the world. We are following a main character who has come home from work one day and discovered that her husband murdered her son and kidnapped her daughter. Now she is looking for her daughter. That sounds very brutal, and there are some heart-rending scenes within this novel. But the reason that her husband murdered her son and stole her daughter was because he found out that they have the ability, it's like a seismic magic. They can cause earthquakes, but also they can still them and calm them, which is how the main empire uses people with this sort of magic to calm the earth and try to prevent these apocalyptic seasons from happening. Our main character also has this ability. She was trying to train it in her children in secret because these types of people are feared and experience prejudice. She was hoping that if she could help them to control what they're doing, then maybe they can stay safe and hidden from the empire that wants to basically steal them away and use them. So that's the main storyline. This woman is searching for her daughter, encountering other people along the way that are unraveling kind of a larger story. There are two other perspectives. One is a woman who has this ability. She's been living in essentially the Imperial City, learning how to control it. She's a 4-ringer, where 10 ringers are like the most powerful. She gets sent away from the Imperial City on a mission with a 10-ringer who's supposed to help mentor her as they have to deal with a problem in a harbor of a city that only people like them can handle. And another perspective is of a child who has been basically locked up in a barn by her parents because they discovered that she has this ability, and then someone from the Empire comes to get her to bring her to the Empire to start the training. It is a very compelling storyline. These three storylines build on each other throughout the entire trilogy. The main characters are essentially trying to avert a larger crisis from occurring. If you haven't read this trilogy yet, and maybe you thought, it's overhyped, everyone was talking about it. I don't really want to read it. I'm here to say you should give the first one a try, because the plot and the world building and the characters, like, there's a reason why so many people love these novels, and I do as well. Next favorite fantasy of the year is one of those oddball fantasies. It is a historical fantasy that doesn't have magic in it, inspired by World War I and World War II, but in a made-up landscape. It is called Dark of the West by Joanne Hathaway. When I read this novel, it swept me away. The evocative writing, the dynamics between the characters on the different sides of the war. On one side is more of a military dictator. They've recently fought for their independence from monarchy's side. On the other side is a monarchy led by a queen and their alliance of other monarchies. These two leaders do not like each other for very personal reasons. It's really interesting how these personal and political reasons impact the decisions of the two main characters, which are their children. We have the daughter of the queen and the son of the military dictator, who is a pilot himself. Joanne Hathaway puts them through some emotional and physical turmoil, that's for sure. I loved all 3 books in this trilogy. I think it's underrated. I wish more people would read it. There is a little bit of a romantic subplot between these two characters, but it's very much like they had a moment and then the war swept them apart, and they're on two sides of this larger conflict. It's about your honor and how family tragedy and your attachments to the people that you look up to, even if maybe you don't truly love them, how those family dynamics impact why you do the things that you do. Sometimes you do good things for the wrong reasons and you do bad things for the right reasons. It's a complicated story, politically, militaristically, and emotionally. My favorite part of the story, and this is odd, is the prologue of the first novel, because the prologue actually takes place later in the war, where just things are not going well for both of our characters. They're facing off in this desolate setting. There's clearly a war happening. These characters are on two different sides of a war. And then all of a sudden, chapter 1, you go back a couple of steps. You go back before they even meet, when they're a little bit younger, when they're a lot more naive. And then the whole time you're reading, you're just wondering, how do we get to there? The trilogy brings us there. It's a wonderful ride. You should read these novels. The next novel on my list is another oddball because there's not a ton of magic in it. Another historically inspired fantasy called She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I am not super well versed in the history that this novel is drawn from, but it is the story of the first emperor of China after they have defeated the Mongol rulers, and how this person who became emperor rose from someone who was absolutely nothing. The main character, Chul, was a peasant that almost starved to death at the beginning. In fact, her brother does basically starve to death or gives himself up to grief, which is just so wrong to Chul, because her brother's fate, according to a local seer, was for greatness, and her fate was to be nothing. So when her brother dies at the very beginning of the novel, she decides she is going to take his fate. She is going to become great. And if she is going to fulfill that destiny, then everyone, even the gods and the heavens, have to believe that she is her brother. So she takes on this persona, tries to become her brother in every way, becomes a monk, and then enters this war, and is a very morally gray character. Another main character in this story, another morally gray character, is a general on the other side of the war. He's on the Mongol side of the war. He has been raised by a family that destroyed his own family, and he wants revenge for that. His story also is about desire and fate, and how he thinks that he's fated to carry out this vengeance for his family, even though he may love some of the people in the family that did this to him. You have these very personal struggles occurring in the backdrop of this war where they're facing off against one another that I found mesmerizing to read. And That's why it's one of my favorite novels of the year. It's quite epic in scope. It's very militaristic. If you don't enjoy military fantasy, it may be too much for you. But if you do like military fantasy, you should read this one. Next, another not too magical historical fantasy, Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I've talked about it a lot recently, so I won't speak too much on it. In fact, I have a video discussing this novel in detail. It's like Pride and Prejudice meets World War I. This woman of society is recruited into Her Majesty's war, fights in it, really identifies with being a soldier, is on this awful battlefield, and then when the war is over has to come to terms with not being a soldier anymore, the new way society is. It's just so well done. But if you want more thoughts, go watch that previous video that I made on it. It was a surprise favorite. I wasn't expecting to love this novel as much as I did. Next, more traditional style epic fantasy, The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I have a reading vlog where I read this book and talked about my thoughts as I was reading it. I really enjoyed it. It's about two main characters, a woman who is trying to regain her lost memory so that she's able to control bone shard magic so that she can inherit the empire from her father. This bone shard magic is key, according to him, to protect their people from this invading species that nearly wiped them out in the past. Another character is a smuggler who is searching for his wife who was kidnapped and gets wrapped up in this rebellion against the emperor. He is sort of that reluctant figure that doesn't want to fight but does anyway and comes out very lucky because of it, usually. The dynamics of these two characters when they ultimately meet, I very much enjoyed. Then I have an honorable mention, a book that I recently finished. It's a young adult fantasy romance. I have to put it on this list because once I finished the first book, I immediately read the other two in the trilogy. They are very quick reads, but I was very taken in by the plot and really wanted to know what happens next. So it was a favorite of the year. The Winter's Curse by Mary Rutowski. This novel is inspired by Rome and its spreading empire. The main character is the daughter of the emperor's favored general who's very successful. They conquered this piece of land, and the daughter has grown up in this area that was previously conquered. The previous inhabitants of this land have now become enslaved. The other main character of this story is one of these slaves who is secretly a spy, gets himself placed into the household of the general in order to spy and enact this rebellion. So you have their relationship, which is quite complicated because she literally bought him at the slave market for reasons. This trilogy discusses themes of colonialism and empire. Even though there's like slave owning in this novel, I thought it handles those issues very well because those issues are like one of the things that this novel is trying to talk about. Of course, there's a little bit of, as their positions change relative to one another, there's a little bit of an enemies to lovers kind of romance. There are certain tropes I like. They're on opposite sides of this conflict. The colony does not want to be a colony and they want their independence back. And with the help of the spy, they try to do just that. So I finished the first novel and was like, yeah, I can't stop now. Very fast pace, but how these characters are written and how they question themselves and they question their own motivation. A lot of introspection in that sort of sense, but also a lot of action. I really liked the whole trilogy. And that's it. Those are some of my favorite fantasy novels or trilogies that I read this past year. It's strange to me that so many of my favorites aren't a traditional feeling fantasy, but it's always good to try new styles, and apparently I really liked military fantasy with only hints of magic that was in a lot of these novels that I loved this year. Let me know what your favorite fantasy novels of the year were. I'm always looking for more recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this style of video. Subscribe if you haven't, and don't forget to support your local library. Thank you.